Cameron Hashemi.
What's up?
Welcome. So
to the fourth rendition of
to the second rendition of this podcast.
Okay.
To the
fourth iteration.
It's the fourth podcast.
Yeah.
The second attempt at this podcast. I don't even know how many you did for the last one, but we're here.
A few, yeah. So what's it? So I know you're gonna ask me questions, but what's it called?
Welcome to the Strength Movement.
Okay.
The Strength Movement is a podcast. I have it written down because it's for like the bio.
The intro. Yeah.
It is. I'm gonna pull it up here.
Yeah, pull up your bio.
This is the bio.
I feel like you should have it memorized at this point.
I should. I really should. But admit it, the setup for this one is better than pretty much any of the other ones we've done.
Way faster.
Right?
Even the first time that we tried this podcast, it took 45 minutes before we even started
I just looked it up. It took 38 minutes.
Semantics.
The Strength Movement is a new podcast hosted by Dr. Amar Parekh, a performance-based physical therapist specializing in athletes and sports recovery. Our mission is to share the stories of our athletes, educate our listeners on new research and strategies. Educate our listeners on new rehab strategies and research, and build a stronger, more resilient community.
Okay. Very Huberman Lab. Very Peter Attia, the Drive.
I don't have a Huberman impression.
No, but you got a good. If you lower your voice a little bit and do it, then you're good.
Our mission is to share the stories of our athletes, educate our listeners on new rehab strategies and research, and build a stronger, more resilient community.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds good.
I have to lower my voice.
Are you gonna make some intro music and all that too?
We'll see.
Eventually,
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is
you can just cut the Huberman Lab.
Okay. So, official welcome, Cam.
Thank you.
For those that don't know, if I was to give a 3-sentence introduction in terms of who you are, what would you say?
3 sentences. Okay, start with my name, Cameron Hashemi. I'd say I am the general manager and head coach of CrossFit X, which is a local CrossFit gym here in Bellingham, Washington. I'm assuming all the viewers will know that, or listeners will know.
In the
that
beginning,
it's Bellingham.
For when we look at this 3 years in the
when
future,
it just like blows up,
and people are like, "I'm gonna hunt down to episode 2."
Yeah, no one's gonna care about me. That's okay. And I'd also say I'm a CrossFit athlete.
Yeah,
you know,
I would say you're a competitive CrossFit athlete.
Yeah, I'm a CrossFit athlete.
Yes, for those that don't know, Cameron is a high-level CrossFit athlete, competitive, I would say, in that when we look at the open as like your general guideline, you're consistently quarterfinals.
Yeah.
Inching your way up and towards being more competitive into the semis.
Yeah.
You compete in CrossFit competitions semi-regularly.
Yeah. Locally within Washington.
Washington.
Yeah, within Washington.
So I would say a high-level CrossFit athlete.
Yeah.
There's nothing scaled about your movements.
Yeah.
And so someone who relies on their body, not only for their work, but also as their primary source of like movement, like it's as their primary source of like stress reduction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your past as far as your relationship with physicality and movement and strength, and like how you got to be the athlete that you are.
Sure. Man, I want to try. I'll condense it as best as I can.
It's a long podcast.
Yeah.
Bro. This is not a 30-minute TikTok.
Yeah.
This is
So, growing up, my dad played semi-pro soccer in Iran, right? So he played semi-pro soccer in Iran before he moved to the United States. And then he started coaching like collegiate level soccer and club level soccer. And so I grew up and immediately started playing soccer whenever I grew up as a kid. Which was probably to his joy. He was also I love my dad to death. Just in case he ever sees this, I love my dad to death.
I'm going to cut this clip out. And
yeah,
send it right to
he
him.
was a very critical coach, right? He's a critical coach. He wanted to make sure that my sister and I were always doing well in sports. So I played soccer and played basketball mostly, 2 main sports. So I grew up, played all through about midway through high school. My life took a slight detour, and I kind of fell into addiction, started partying a lot, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Forgot all about any physical activity, anything like that. Gained a ton of weight, and just kind of continued on that path for like a decade.
Right.
And then when I finally got sober, I started to implement exercise honestly, at the beginning, it was for aesthetic purposes, right?
You just wanted to look sure.
Yeah,
I mean, you were a big boy.
Yeah, I was big, low self-confidence. I mean, I was almost 300 pounds at one point. Right. So, really just trying to like look better. That was the sole drive behind me getting more physically active. And then once I started, I ended up seeing a documentary as a CrossFit documentary called The Fittest on Earth.
Is this Buttery Bros?
No, Buttery Bros. So they were definitely on the film team. Yeah, it was Buttery Bros, actually. Yeah, they were still employed with CrossFit at this time. So I saw this documentary and I watched and I was like, holy shit. Like, this is incredible. Like, I need to start doing this. And so I was living in Canada at the time and I looked up a local CrossFit gym. Shout out CrossFit Renegade in Surrey, BC. Jamie Fiddler. That was my first coach. Amazing dude. Kind of looked like a redheaded Wolverine, right? He had like the lamb chops, He's
probably doing really well right now. Now that Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's crushing it. Everyone's coming to his gym. But I signed up. I signed up and went into my first class. And like totally did not scale the class appropriately for myself. I went in and I was doing like bodybuilding splits and stuff like that. And I was doing some cardio on the side. I was like, I'm fit. Like I'm strong. I'm fit. Like at this point.
It's always humbling people's first CrossFit experience.
I'm going to be fine. And I went into my first workout and it was power cleans and box jumps. 7-minute AMRAP. Super short, super simple. Power cleans at 135 and box jumps. And I was like, oh yeah, dude, I'll crush this. And it lit. Is this family friendly? It fucking lit me up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Worst case we can do.
Yeah, for sure. You can put a beep in, but it lit me up. And I got done and I was like, oh yeah, I need more of this.
Right.
And thus like started my CrossFit journey. And it was interesting because as I started going to more and more workouts and becoming a part of that community, kind of my main driving focus of fitness changed from aesthetic goals to more performance-based goals, right? I wanted to make sure that, especially keeping in mind with how limited I felt, especially whenever I was really overweight, I wanted to get to the point where there was no task that I was met with that I couldn't do, whether it was in the gym or out in life.
Well, this is what CrossFit defines itself as, right? Like GPP, multimodality, being able to go on a 5-mile hike and yet still deadlift tons of weight.
Totally. And then after kind of discovering this, I was like, I want to help bring this to other people. Like this is where I feel like I can be of maximum service and be purposeful to other people. Like I want to bring what I experienced to other people. So I went and I started with my ACE certification. I got ACE certified while I was in Canada. And then while I was there, I met my best friend who will probably end up being on this podcast.
He's going to be my next
Scott Sherman, Sherms. And he's from Issaquah originally.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, like, what are you doing whenever you leave Canada? And I was like, well, I'm not going back to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That's where I'm from originally. And he was like, well, I'm from Issaquah originally. I used to play in a band. We toured all over the place. We used to play in this town called Bellingham. Have you ever heard of it? And I was like, no, I've never heard of it. It was also my first time ever in the Pacific Northwest.
Never been here.
Never had been here until I had gotten sober. And so I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, I'm going to look for apartments. Do you want to move? And I was like, yeah, man, I trust you. I'd known him for 2 years at this point. He's one of my best friends. And so packed my stuff up, went and met him down in Orange County where he was visiting his family. And we drove the coast up to Bellingham. And my first job that I got here was with Anytime Fitness.
That's where I first met you.
Yeah, that's where we first met. And I was up at Anytime Fitness and they hired me on as their like member experience manager. And I told them whenever they hired me, it's like, hey, like I'm really looking to train people. Like I don't really want to like manage the gym or anything like that. Like I just want to train people. And they're like, okay, when a spot opens up on our training staff, like you'll be the first one in. So I managed the gym for a few months, and then one of their trainers, who will also probably be on this podcast, Bellingham is like the fitness community is really small, but one of their trainers, Brian Ingalls.
Yeah. I should get Ingalls on this.
You should get Ingalls on the podcast.
Add him to the
He'd
list.
be great. Yeah, Ingalls would be great on this. But so Brian Ingalls was getting ready to leave. He was starting his master's program at Western.
Right.
And so they brought me over. I worked with Brian for about 4 or 5 weeks and kind of assumed his clients and then started building my own client base. And all I was doing at that time was, one-on-one training. I would coach some of their, like, they had burn, base, and build classes, so small group training or medium-sized group training. And I'd run their classes. All in the meantime, I'm still training CrossFit on my own, right?
So you're still a member of CrossFit X?
No, not even yet. No,
Okay.
I haven't even become a member of CrossFit X. I had left Canada. I'm no longer with CrossFit Renegade.
You're just doing it on your own.
I'm just training out of Anytime. And I'm sure, you've been, Anytime Fitness, more of a Globo gym.
Yeah, it's a great gym for what it is.
Fantastic. It's a great gym. Yeah, great gym, great space, good people. But I was doing CrossFit programming, and I'm sure people are like, what the hell is going on here?
Well, Anytime is a great gym. But if you're CrossFit is like you're going from one thing to one thing to one thing.
Yeah.
And like you're running back and forth.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's not the most conducive place for a CrossFit workout.
Yeah, totally. And it's a lot, there's going to be a lot of things that probably seem obscure to a regular gym goer happening in a CrossFit workout. Yeah. So while I was there, 2 guys were coming in to Anytime Fitness to do some like supplemental training, and they were both members at CrossFit X. It was Omar and Matt. Matt's another guy that you should have on here too. Yeah, Matt. Right? Yeah,
he would love to be on.
Yeah, for sure, he would dig it. And they were trying to tell me like, hey, like come into CrossFit X, come into CrossFit X, come into CrossFit X. And I was like, yeah, but my gym membership's free here at Anytime, and CrossFit memberships are expensive. I wasn't making a ton of money at the time, just training people. And then finally they had a bring a friend week in April of 2019, and I went with Matt every single day. It was all partner workouts, and I ended up joining the gym from there. And I knew that my ultimate goal was to be coaching people in the CrossFit space.
So you felt an immediate connection to like that style of coaching.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even whenever I first started training over at CrossFit Renegade, I felt that way. Yeah, absolutely. I was like, that is my end goal. I'd like to coach CrossFit and eventually own a gym, And so I'd been working out there for a few months, and then I approached the gym's owner and said, hey, like I knew that he was doing trades with other coaches. They'd coach X amount of classes a month. They'd get their membership for free. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, like if I got my level 1 certification and then started, training people here, can we trade for my membership? And he's like, yeah, shoot me your availability, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
So I emailed him my availability, and I was working full time at Anytime Fitness. I was working a lot. And he emails me back and he's like, yeah, that's not a lot of availability there. And I was like, yeah, I can maybe do like 2 classes a week. That's what I was hoping. Right. And he was like, hey, well, let's just sit down and get coffee. So we sat down and get coffee. He's asking me about my roles at Anytime Fitness, kind of what I was doing. And then at the end of it, he's like, hey, have you ever considered leaving and coming to run the gym here? I've been looking for someone for the past couple of years to kind of like
do the thing,
run the operations here, and would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, for sure. So on my birthday in 2019, he shoots me an offer letter, right? And I signed the offer letter, and I started January of 2020, right? And then you've heard this story ad nauseum, because I feel like we've done this a bunch.
Because I remember, not only that, you were also one of my best friends. So like, I remember when you first spoke to Travis and you first had that meeting with him, and I was at Anytime Fitness because I have an office there as well. And you're like, so, I got to talk to you about something.
Yeah.
And then I remember when you signed the offer letter.
Yeah.
And then I remember January, and then obviously I remember March.
And,
then, and I remember everything that happened since then, right? Like, for those that don't know, COVID.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've been living under a rock.
But that's a big rock.
Yeah.
So since January, you came in. Obviously, there was a hiatus, and then immediately transitioned from March into like problem solving mode at CrossFit. Like, which was like, hey, we got to figure this thing out.
Totally. And then it just kind of took off from there. And, I've been at X now for 4.5 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
And competing, I mean, I remember your first competition was 2019.
Yep.
Cascade Classic. My experience with you as a trainer was I moved here in January 2019 to Bellingham. You got me ready for the Tough Mudder.
Yep. Which is super fun.
I came in much different shape than I am now.
Yeah, totally.
And that, I mean, you've seen me through all of my struggles, as I consider you to be a CrossFit coach, but also as almost like my kind of pseudo personal trainer, in that like I had 2 kids, health goes down when you're in the deep sleep state and like unslept state, and then like kind of bouncing back and forth. But through it all, like you've been the trainer and like the person that's kind of like, kind of rode the waves with me.
Yeah, totally.
In those 4 years, I've seen you go through a few injuries.
Yeah.
Both as a friend and then almost like as a client, right? Like, and you and I have this relationship that is different than I would say most of my patients, in that like we are very close friends. So like I trust you to be more of an advocate for yourself, and I kind of put more upon you to like handle a lot of your own injuries. One, because you spend a lot of time with me and know how I treat, but two, you also are a coach and have a background in this stuff. Take me through kind of like a few of what those injuries may have looked like. And then the one I want to nail into today is the neck and shoulder, kind of like the biggest one.
Sure.
That we've kind of worked through.
Yeah. And those are the two, like, cause that happened twice, right? And they were practically within a year of each other.
Right.
They both happened on the same movement, turning over on a ring muscle up, and then just shot my left shoulder. And those are really like, you know, whenever I think about my history with fitness, from an injury standpoint, those are the two that really like stick out in my mind, right? Those are the two big ones. I mean, we've done some stuff where, you know, I had a heavy back squat, I got some hip, I had
little things here and there.
You had to
little
release my psoas, and then you released it and it started to feel better. Yeah, tons of stuff like that.
I remember that one.
Yeah. Well, that was yeah. But I'm just laughing because it was probably like the most excruciating pain that I'd ever been in. And I go to Amar's office, and he's like, "Okay, we're gonna release your psoas." You know, I'd never had it done before. I'd never dealt with it. And he's like, "I'm gonna give you these 2 lacrosse balls that you can squeeze onto if you need it." And so he lays me down on the table, and he's like knuckles deep in my hip and just puts pressure right into my psoas, and I felt my body vibrate. Like I started to sweat on the table.
Immediately.
Oh yeah, my vision started to close in. But I'll tell you what, as soon as it released,
gone.
Completely.
It's a great technique.
Gone.
It's a great immediate but transient technique to help relieve pain. Anyway.
Yeah, completely gone. So I guess I'll take it back to the first shoulder injury. You know, it was the first time that I had incurred anything like this. Turning over on a ring muscle up, felt like very, very like intense localized pain in the shoulder, and then as soon as I was done, just weakness, right? Just like loss of movement, would have to assist my arm up. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before. And so you and I went into it, and I mean, it was like any pressing, static pressing, dynamic pressing, anything like that, anything that took my shoulder from like internal rotation into external rotation. So snatching was painful. I had a lot that I couldn't do. And so first time that ever happened, obviously I was a little panicked about it. But we worked together for a while on that. Right. And it's funny because, you know, obviously we know each other well. We see each other all the time. And most of our treatments are like quick, like release treatments. Yeah.
You know? I squeeze you in between patients. Be like, hey, you got 5 minutes here? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I need this released, or I need this work done. I'll do the resiliency work on my own. I got it.
Yeah, exactly.
But can you just like give me like off the hamster wheel?
But this is the first time that we had ever done any like actual treatment together, you know? And I'm trying to remember what you diagnosed it as, but I remember doing a lot of like internal rotation work, lots of like lat strengthening as well. We also did like a bunch of isometrics, specifically in like snatch grip overhead positions where I was on an incline.
I mean, I remember that conversation when you first came in, because we did have that kind of like quick treat relationship. And I just remember you being like, listen, I need to see you. And I was like, cool, I got 10 minutes here. You're like, no.
Yeah.
We need to put something in the books.
Yeah.
And I think for you, that was the first huge like thing where you're like, this is like a bigger deal than like a normal,
quick fix. Yeah, it's not a quick fix anymore.
What did that feel like for you at the time? Was it like scary? Was it like, do you remember?
Yeah. So the first one, not so much. The second one's really vivid to me. But the first injury that I had was more like just a fear of the unknown kind of thing. Like, is this ever going to get better?
Yeah.
You know, am I going to be able to compete if I can't do these movements again? And then also like living in fear of movements. That was a big thing too. You know, like every time I would like go into the gym and pass the rings, I'd be like, you know, and I'm like, oh, is today the day that I can try this? You know,
just the unknown.
Yeah. And like, it caused like a huge lack of confidence in my abilities. Yeah. And so there was just a lot of unknown, right? Like a lot of unknown.
I mean, ring muscle ups are a high movement task. One of the things we often see is like, especially for people that are competitive, oftentimes the anxiety revolves around like, can I do the thing that I want to do? Mm-hmm. Which for you is high level CrossFit.
Totally.
You know, like ring muscle ups are a staple when you get to a certain level of CrossFit. They are a necessity to be able to cross a certain level of like competition. Mm-hmm. And like, if
they call it a separator movement.
There you go.
You know, it's a separator movement.
Yeah. And so if you can't do that, you are limiting yourself on this kind of like on the rung of like the normals.
Totally. Well, yeah.
I'm a little bit below normal. I get it.
No. I wasn't going to say that. It's all subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary.
Scary, for sure. Scary. And then, I'm sorry, I'm going to speed through this first one and get into the second one. But, you know, several months, right? It was several months before the issue, like, you know, before I was able to start like pressing again without pain, and then being able to get like inverted and you know, do handstand push-ups without pain. And it was like this trickle effect. Like I would slowly start to be able to do more movements, add them back in, but still living in fear of getting on the rings.
Right.
You know, and I remember after that injury, it'd been maybe 6 months or so, at least 4.5 to 6 months. Timeline's kind of fuzzy. And I hadn't been on the rings at all. And the first workout of the open gets released. And I was just praying that there weren't going to be any ring muscle ups. And it's the last movement.
Of
right?
course.
Yeah.
Of course. Last movement of the third workout.
For sure. You know, and I remember starting to warm up for it. And I was like, I'm not even going to try and do one in warm up.
Right.
You know, the workout's going to get me warm, you know, leading up. It was the last movement in this, you know, quintuplet. 5 movements in the workout. And I was like, I'll be warm by that time and we're just going to find out. And I got to that point in the workout, went up for a ring muscle up, got it. No pain, no pain, nothing like that. I was like, okay, cool. Now, was I very good at them at this point because I had taken such a long break? No, it felt like I was relearning the movement in the middle of a warm up or in the middle of a workout. But so I had that happen and I was like, oh man, cool. I can start training these again.
Yeah.
And I just went
hard,
full tilt into it, training them at no less than 2 times a week, if not 3 times a week in different modalities. So I would try and do like, you know, carry them every 3 minutes. So I was fresh every time I turned over and spine. So I'd do like a set every 3 minutes, lots of recovery, felt good. So pretty much fresh. Then I do them with some like cardiovascular fatigue. So I'd go under a little bit of cardiovascular loading. Maybe I like ride the bike for a second or run a little bit before I kick up. Then I'd start adding in like shoulder fatigue, grip fatigue, you know, midline fatigue.
You tried to catch up.
Different areas of fatigue. Yeah. So it's like, okay, no matter what condition I'm in, I can get right up onto the rings and do them. And I think it was just, you know, obviously I should know this, right? But in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go, you know, but it's just too much volume too quickly. And then a few months later,
one more
goes again. Yeah. Right. And you're working with Aaron at this time. You and Aaron are working together. And I come back to you and I'm like, hey, like same thing, you know, like
we reflared.
Yeah. I reflared and it was bad. You know, it was bad.
I would say the second time was worse than the first.
Second time was definitely worse than the first time for sure. And, my first thought after, and it's funny because I remember the exact workout in which it happened. I was doing a partner workout on a Saturday. My shoulder girdle was already like pre-fatigued from previous days of training. Mm-hmm. And I'd programmed this workout and it had ring muscle ups in it. And I was like, maybe I should just do bar muscle ups today. Less, you know, less instability from the rings. There's less wiggle room. You're more fixed, like, you know, overall, like we'll call it safer. Right. Right. And I was working out and someone from CrossFit Colshan came to come work out with me for it. And I was like, well, she's going to do ring muscle ups. Like I should do ring muscle ups too, you know.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is called an ego.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And 100%. And I kicked up on my first, or I got up to my first set of ring muscle ups, did 1, felt fine, did 2, felt fine. Number 3, gone. And my immediate thought was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do these again. You know, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to ever do this movement again. Because at some point, this is what happens.
So that takes it from like a one-time injury to like, this is no longer going to be part of my...
This isn't a movement for me. Yeah, it's not a movement for me, is what I thought, because I mean, I got down and it's like my arm was like numb, you know, it's like I had hardly any movement. Same thing, had to assist my arm up to get in. So I'm like, okay, well, like,
either that or you're going to live in fear forever.
Yeah.
Like, at least that's the thought, right?
Exactly.
It's like either I say, hey, this is not a movement for me and I can live my life, or this is always something I'm going to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it was either that Sunday or Monday I reached out to you and was like, hey, like, I need to come see you.
Yeah.
We got to do another set
Make
of
some
treatments.
space.
Yeah, we got to do real treatments.
Yeah.
And so we went through an assessment process, and essentially boiled it down to like, some scapular, like my left scap wasn't quite moving as it should in comparison to my right scap, and kind of diagnosed it down to like, okay, you have all these major movers like your lat, and you have all these big players in the game and they're just really strong, and these muscles in your rotator cuff, right? Also like your serratus and your teres, so like just little assistant aren't really working the way that they should. And you could see it, like, whenever I'd move, like my right shoulder blade would move, like stay hugged to my body, to my rib cage, like it would move well. Like as soon as I'd start moving about the left, I was slightly winged out. I wasn't getting as much movement.
I remember seeing this when you were doing it. Was one side was nice and smooth and the other side was like kind of like shot. It was like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And it would just like go from one to the other with no kind of like clear path.
Totally.
And so it was almost like just like this very shaky movement coming up and down.
Yeah.
And you're like, it feels fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, if that's how you're normally moving, granted, asymmetries are normal, and like we don't necessarily try to make you the most symmetrical person. But when one thing is symptomatic and you have symptoms around a condition, when you can identify these it just gives you a magnifying glass of where to look.
Sure. Yeah. And it was a gross asymmetry, right?
Yeah, it was
like
pretty big.
It was an apparent one, and it just looked like I had no control.
Right.
And so we did a bunch of like teres work, lots of serratus work.
Right.
Like tons of stability work. Yeah. Stabilizing on the rings, things like that. And I mean, that was several months too. I will say this is the first time in my history with PTs in general, especially with you, that I did my homework.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that you said that. Like, that just proves the value of the HEP.
100%. Because I'd say so obviously my first shoulder injury wasn't as bad.
Right.
But I wasn't really doing the homework.
No one does.
Let
me give you a little secret.
Yeah, for sure.
As someone that's been doing this for a long time, I can educate people all the time on the importance of doing their homework. I email it. I write it down.
Yep.
Put it in. This is what you're going to do 3 times a week. Invariably, once there's a motivational driver in pain. Where when somebody's in pain, they're more willing to do the thing. They come in, and this, like, for me, the challenge is always educating you that, like, I'm going to help you take the pain away. Manual therapy, cupping, the gun, the thing, it's all temporary in an effort to get you off the hamster wheel of pain. When you feel relief, you have to do the resiliency work to maintain this amazing pain-free function.
Totally.
But once you take that pain away, the motivational driver kind of disappears.
Yeah, for sure. You're like, I'm no longer in pain. I don't have to do the thing that got me out of pain.
Yeah.
Right. And so I did my homework week after week, even though, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of people know, PT work can be monotonous and boring.
Mundane and boring.
Yeah, for sure.
And
it's
our job
sexy.
and it's not fun, because my job is to find the weak points and put a magnifying glass on it, which means you're always doing things you're not good at. Like, I remember for you, when we had that day and we were looking at that, and I'm like, okay, do this move specifically targeting the teres and the small muscles, and you're crushing it on this arm, and I remember you just sweating.
Oh yeah. Do you remember having me do the banded abductions?
Oh,
with like the lightest mini band
and you're
possible.
Like, I don't understand. And you're just sweating. You're like, I'm working really hard.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know.
I mean,
that's the point.
I couldn't pull that band all the way to, like, I would literally pull that band maybe a few inches down, right? I get a couple, like 20 degrees, and then I'm like, holy shit, this is the hardest I've ever had to work.
Yeah.
You know?
And so, like, the job is to do things that you're not good at.
Yeah.
Which again, ego.
Totally. Yeah.
It's
It's a big ego check,
and it's
being
boring.
And being okay using like a 3-pound crossover symmetry band to do, just to do some angels,
these little things. Because you're right. HEPs are boring and you're out of pain, and they are putting a spotlight on making you not feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
But you have to educate people and like, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So credit to you. You did the homework.
Thanks. I did the homework. I mean, it was a long time. And I mean, there were moments, because I mean, it was a long time. It's several months, and there were definitely times within it that I was like, I don't know if this is ever going to get better. Or like, I don't know if like I'm going to be able to do this movement again.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe I should just like stop trying to be competitive and just like, just do whatever feels good. And I think there's merit to that, but like just me, the way that I am, it's like, I'm always trying to get better in some capacity. And that ebbs and flows. I feel like that like kind of ebbs and flows for everybody, but I'd say more often than not, it's like, okay, I'm trying to progress. I'm trying to push. I'm trying to get better. And I still do like to compete, like I still do like to compete. And so, it was a tough time, but I will say that I think that my headspace, having experience with that shoulder injury, was better this time around, in the sense of like patience.
So when you're like, take me into your brain in like, let's say the second month, where you've been doing the home exercise program for a while, you're still not able to do the ring muscle up. Things are getting better. And I think, I wonder if that's part of it, like just focusing on the small wins, but like you're still questioning the result. What is the self-talk there to kind of pull yourself through? Because invariably people, when they have injuries, some of them take a long time, and you can have these moments like, and not for nothing, ring muscle ups is a high level movement that you don't have to do every day. Yeah. So it's not back pain or knee or shoulder, where it's like it's affecting your day.
Yeah, it's a sports specific.
It doesn't affect your day-to-day life. So like for you, like what is the thing for you to be like, I'm going to keep struggling through this. Even though I can't necessarily see the light yet. Like, how do you have the patience and like the, call it discipline, to like stay in the grind when you can't see what's on the other side? Yeah.
So I think to the first point that you made, right, mentioning the small wins, that was a big thing for me. So every time I was able to do something, no matter how big or small, that I couldn't do without pain prior to, that was a slight motivator, right? So like, I remember the first one was like, I was having a lot of trouble, like initiating my, like this first piece of my strict press without pain. As soon as I was able to get through that entire range of motion without pain, small win.
I remember that one.
Yeah, that was a win, right? First time I was able to kick up and get inverted and do a strict handstand push-up without pain, win, right? First time I was able to do a ring dip negative. So even before that, even just being able to get into a ring support without pain.
Do you remember the one that I had you do where you were here and I had you like shuttle out just a little like underweight, and I'm like, this is going to happen when you're when you're up there.
Totally.
Like you're going to have to be stable. We always talk about overhead stability, but like being stable for ring muscle ups. And I had you like, just
shuttle out a little bit. Yeah.
I remember that.
Which was super hard. I remember I did that over at I Love It the first time before I went on vacation. I was like, holy shit, this is way hard. So yeah, like all those little wins were big motivators. I think having previous experience with that injury, because like obviously I know that I mentioned earlier, like my immediate reaction was like, I'm never going to be able to do these again. But like, whenever I actually sat down and looked at it, it's like, okay, you've incurred an injury like this before, right? You've made it through this injury and you've been able to return back to that movement specifically, right? So having that in my mental definitely helped keep me motivated, being like, okay, even though I don't know when this is going to end, like I don't know when this is going to get better, but I have evidence from my past that supports that it will get better, right? In the meantime, let's celebrate these small wins, these little victories, inching closer and closer to being pain-free in all movements, and eventually it'll happen, right? That's the perspective that I tried to keep, because I've had like a bunch of little things happen along the way, and it's very easy to get stuck in the mind frame of like, poor me, like I'm injured, look at all these things that I can't do. Right. as opposed to like, okay, I can still do this and that and this, and I'm working towards being able to do that, but it's just not in the cards right now. Yeah. But I'm taking the steps necessary to get there. I think that's a much healthier perspective to keep.
100%.
Right? Than, I can't do this.
It's funny because like I'll see like my job, especially as people are going through their rehab process, is to act like a cheerleader for the small wins.
Sure.
Because oftentimes people don't give themselves enough credit for the work that they've done and the small wins that they've achieved. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, when somebody comes in, let's say with a knee pain or a back pain, my job is twofold. One, to evaluate the injury and like obviously point the sale that way and like deal with the physical, but also to tell that person that just because one thing is not working as efficiently as it should, mm-hmm. you can still do this.
Totally.
You can still do X. So take a CrossFit athlete that has a shoulder injury.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, okay, I can call Cam and tell him that like, these are the modifiers that you're going to make, but guess what? You can still do the box jumps. Mm-hmm. You can still do this. And like having that relationship to tell somebody like if you've hurt yourself in your CrossFit, like the journey's not over. Like these are still some things that you can do that help you define who you are.
Yeah.
Like, especially for athletes that define themselves by their movement. And so like leaning into that, like it's not all bad.
Yeah.
Like, let's look at the things that you can work on that don't necessarily flare this.
Yeah, exactly.
While you also get better at that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you are good about doing that. And it's like the same, it's the same thing in coaching too, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. It's like, you have an athlete who's been training for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and they're looking at a bunch of the things that they cannot do yet after that time. And it's like, hey, like, let's also look at all the things that you've been able to do now that you couldn't do a year ago.
Right.
Like, let's not forget about all this because there's some things off in your visage that you haven't attained yet.
And I'll speak to experience from that, just working with you as a coach. 2 to 3 days ago, I failed a push press.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, hey, Amar, like we need to I've been working on them again. I've been doing CrossFit now on and off for years.
Yeah.
My front rack and my ability to shelf
mm-hmm.
has never been good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, we got to work on the shelf. And it can be frustrating to be like, fuck, I've been doing this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm still having this issue where I can't drive and like generate force up
mm-hmm.
and like have it transfer over into my arms. But then you go, okay, well, at least the part after this is burpees and running and I'm better at that. Yeah. I was better at the burpees and running. Like there's, and then also just to be like, hey, you might not be where you need to be, but like you can finally like load on the shelf.
Yep.
Like it might not be comfortable, but you're there now.
Yep.
And you couldn't even be there before, so it's like these little chips.
For sure. And also, to that point too, also being like, okay, like we're going to kind of change some things technically with how you move. And it might actually set you back for a little bit.
Right.
You might be able to push press 155 right now. As soon as I adjust your positioning and start getting you there, you might only be able to push press 75. But I guarantee if you develop strength here, you're going to be able to push past that 155 that you have been push pressing.
For those wondering, my push press is 375 pounds. And with my sloppy mechanics, and I was shooting for 405.
Yeah.
Just so that we know, just so that we're all clear as far as like ever strong is ever strong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was going for a 405.
For sure. No, I'm sure there's zero confusement about that out there.
Just saying.
Yeah.
So in the moment, you are focusing on the small wins.
Yeah.
And and I guess the reality of the situation has hit you in that it's not as detrimental as you thought initially.
Totally. I just think I had a more mature perspective this time. I think like just the past experience with things allowed me to look at the big picture and be like, okay, like tons that you can do. There's a lot of things that you couldn't do when you first got injured that you can do now. And like, although you have no idea when you're going to be able to turn over on those rings, it's going to happen eventually.
Right.
Just
have faith in the process.
Yeah, for sure.
You finally hit ring muscle ups.
I did. I remember. I don't remember if you were at the gym or if I texted you and let you know. But it was weird. It was one of those things that, I had just done a workout. I was feeling warm. Like my body was feeling good. A lot of things within the work that I was doing prior to kind of like warmed my shoulder girdle up, And I don't know. Do you ever just have a feeling and you're like, okay, I can do this now.
Yeah.
You know,
every time I go to a casino and it never works out.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Then you lose everything. Sorry, Celeste.
I feel like I'm going to hit a 21 here. Like,
Yeah.
let's go.
But, you know, I went up to the rings and I was like, okay, you're going to do a 10-minute EMOM. You're going to do 1 ring muscle up.
Got it.
Okay. You do 1 ring muscle up. And I went up on my first one, felt amazing. And I was like, oh,
Here it is,
you know, and I stuck to it. I didn't think like, oh yeah, okay,
I got to do 7.
Yeah, let's do 5 every, just accumulate a ton of volume. It was like, nope, I sticked with 1. I did 10. I felt good afterwards, you know, and that's been my approach to them since I was able to, you know. It's been a couple of months now since I've started working them back in, but I work on them once a week.
Yeah.
You know, once a week right now, just to make sure like, okay, get myself good and warm, get up there. I've slowly started to introduce like some stress to the movement, right? Like something prior to, and it didn't start with like, okay, let's blow my shoulders up first and then get on it. It was like, okay, let's get our heart rate up just a little bit, right?
Chip.
Yeah, just a little bit. Try and do 1 or 2. Don't try and do a max effort set, you know. Don't do it 3 times a week.
Right.
And it's been fine.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think to that end, it's also important to realize that like, as you build, there might be a time where it doesn't feel great, and being able to listen to your body to scale back in those times means you won't be at a position where the arm goes completely dead again.
Yeah.
But more, hey, this didn't feel right now. I'm going to scale back right now. And that way tomorrow I can come back to it.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I still do maintenance PT work.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, you know, do I do it at the frequency that I did it whenever I had the injury originally? Yeah. No.
Yeah.
You know, but I still touch on those things, you know, and make sure that I'm getting activated before I put myself into that movement.
Right. 100%.
You know?
So when we look at like, you get through all of it, what would you say you have either learned about yourself or like your training specifically with regards to this injury?
One, for human bodies are resilient.
Yeah.
Right. They can come back from quite a bit. Perspective is the most important thing. Like trying to keep perspective, especially like while rehabbing an injury, just like I mentioned earlier, just trying to maintain like some semblance of positivity and like, okay, like accepting the reality of where you're at, but not dwelling on the things that you cannot do.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I feel like that just sets you up for failure and to quit early. But that was like the main thing. It's like, man, like I kept a much better perspective throughout this entire rehab process than I did the last time.
Yeah.
You know, and it helped me still enjoy my training. Right.
Yeah.
And not get...
I didn't see you go down like the between the first and second injury. There was a little bit of a rabbit hole mentally that I saw the first time that I didn't see so much the second time. It was like, hey, I'm here. Like, what do I need? It was more, I would say, like directed towards the task. Whereas the first time I was like, I had to direct towards the person. Whereas like the first time I had to be like, you're going to be fine. Like, we just have to like keep building.
Yeah.
And the second time was like, all right, this is where I'm at. Like, we got that part down.
Yeah. And I also feel like it's helped me better approach like my clients or like, you know, people that I'm close with who are also dealing with injury, you know, and helping them find some perspective through it. You know, like I think about with Cheyenne, you know, and everything that she has going on with her body, like, you know, trying to help her keep perspective also. Right. You know, so it's helped in that regard as well.
So let's say you're talking to you in the middle of like the heart of your injury. Or you're dealing with someone that's going through something similar. Like, what are the things that you're telling that person in order to avoid them from like going down the rabbit hole?
Yeah. So I'll always start with like acknowledging the fact that they cause you know, it's a real thing. Like, you know, you have an injury and I know that, you know, it sucks. It does suck, you know? But trying to remind them of like all of the things that their body still can do, right? And in ensuring them that they are taking the right steps towards fixing the injury. Right. Yeah. You know, and being like, hey, like, you know, same thing that I was talking about with myself earlier. It's like celebrating the small wins. Look at these things like little increments that are getting you towards your goal. Right. As opposed to like looking way down the road and being like, I don't see the end there. Like there's no light at the end of the tunnel for me here. Right. You know, you stay focused on that. you're just going to dwell on it. Most likely it's going to set you back, you know? So that's really it. It's not, I don't feel like it's rocket science,
No.
you know, and it's a very simple, it's simple, not easy. Right.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. It's, you know,
and it requires you to be empathetic with yourself.
Yeah.
Like empathy comes easy to some people and not to some people, but it's really hard for people to be empathetic with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of us, especially in this like athletic community, I put myself in it.
Yeah, totally.
You hold
yourself to a high standard.
Hold ourselves to a high standard
Yeah.
where oftentimes we put external things as like our ego revolves around these things. And it's hard sometimes to be like, I'm hurt. That's okay. And perhaps like the thing that defines who we are is not capable for me right now, but that doesn't change who I am.
Yeah.
And like, I need to be okay with the fact that I'm injured and know that like I'm going to work towards it, but I still have all these other things that make me who I am that may not have been my original identifying characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
So like for you, I know one of the things you identify as is a high level CrossFitter.
Mm-hmm.
CrossFit is a big part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if part of that is taken away, it can be really hard to be like, I was a high level CrossFitter.
Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to make a quick note. Just notice this entire podcast, I have not once referred to myself as a high level CrossFitter.
I refer to you, but I also know but CrossFit is a part of your life and being able to do these
totally
movements. And it can be hard to be like, especially when you can't do the things, to be like, now what?
What? Yeah. Like what, you know, yeah, it could very easily be a loss of identity.
Right.
You know?
And so being like, these are still other things that I am and like that I can do. And I'm still working to become the thing that I was.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard thing for people to do when they're hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, that's a good one. And now where are you at? Now you're cruising.
Yeah, now I'm injury free. I'm getting married soon. Cheyenne and I are getting married in October. Amar's in my wedding.
I am. Cream colored suit, baby.
I know. I
picked
it to the one brown man in the wedding. Well, I guess I'm like half.
And so and there are some people in your wedding that can tan very well.
Yeah, for sure. You know, we had to make sure you look good. So.
Cam, this was awesome. Is there anything you wish people knew when they're going through something similar to what you're going through? Or what you went through, I should say, with regards to the injury?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I said everything that I needed to.
Yeah.
I mean, just do your best to keep perspective and try and remember, like, you know, although you're going through injury and a hard time with your physicality, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're rehabbing the process, like trust in the process, trust in your practitioner and the work that you're putting in, that things are going to get better, and try and focus on the things that you can do and the little wins in the meantime.
Yeah.
You know,
I like the way you said that. I keep hearing like patience and perspective.
Yeah.
Like
that's all you got though. You know, because it doesn't change the reality. Like your situation doesn't change regardless of how you feel about the situation, right?
Yeah.
You still are in that situation.
And I think the thing you got to realize is when there are those moments of doubt, like you said, like you had points where you were like, I don't think this is going to happen, but if I don't do the thing, then like you're going to go
if I
back.
don't do the thing, it's definitely not going to happen.
Yeah. And then you're going to regret not being able to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being here, bro.
Yeah, totally.
That was good.
Yeah, good.
How did this one compare to the other ones we've done?
Good. Yeah, it flowed well. Yeah, I think if I was to give one piece of feedback is I would maybe have a question sheet that you can give to your guest prior to, so they can just think about.
Give me your top three. Was it the top three sentences?
No, not necessarily. And like, you know, who knows? Maybe if I like thought about it a little bit more, I would have said something a little bit differently. That's just, you know, what came to my mind right then. You know, I don't have this stuff like on.
There was an idea that somebody flowed to me, which was you should do this while working on somebody's body.
You should.
Like just like hot ones.
Hot ones. Yeah.
Like it's like, let me go into your hip flexor. And like, so tell me about that injury you had.
Yeah.
What was your brain going through?
Yeah, some like intense body work while you're interviewing someone. I mean, it could only be like a 20-minute session because your hands would get too tired. But
so while we wait.
Yeah. No. But no, I thought it was great. Great flow. we'll see how it looks. Hopefully I don't sound like a fucking idiot.
You probably will, but that's
if I do, it's okay.
We'll compare it to the old one.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like you got to get perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective.
Yeah.
And
I
patience.
definitely went on to this one being like, this one's not even going to go on the air, so it doesn't matter.
This one, I think, out of all of them, has the highest likelihood of going on the air.
Well, that's okay then. Yeah, that's also all right.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you as always. Thanks so much. I usually say stay ever strong, but this is an ever strong thing. So
What's
be
your
strong.
tag?
I have no idea.
We got to figure out a tag for you.
I should steal the Mark Bell one. Strength is never a weakness.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I give Mark Smelly Bell.
Yeah.
All of the credit on there. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
Cool.
Peace.
Okay, what'd you think?